Hi guys, welcome to the Crocodile podcast. I'm your host Nate, along with my co-host Matt,
Hey,
and today we have the special honor of being joined by Mr. Chris Dieter. Chris, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
So Chris, what first got you into reptiles and specifically crocodilians?
Probably like everybody else, I just watched a lot of Godzilla when I was a kid and kind of just grew from there. So you just always wanted to go ahead and a lot of guys grow up to have big, fast cars, and I just wanted to get bigger reptiles. And so you just kind of work the progression through, and eventually you go from, small animals to monitor lizards to eventually the biggest ones of all, the crocodiles.
All right, so you are the owner and curator of Crocodile Encounter down here in Angleton, Texas.
Uh-huh.
And is there anything special about your facility that you feel proud of?
I don't. That's a loaded question. We're the largest crocodile facility in the United States, so if that's something to be proud of, I don't know, but it is what it is. But we've had a lot of success in that with the species that we keep and with reproduction, and more importantly, just being a community member. That we've been really well received with the community here, and kind of a little bit. I don't want to say a model facility for how education can be done with crocodilians, but we've done really, really well with it through the years, and alongside keeping our conservation aspect growing as well. So it's kind of worked pretty well in that regard.
would you say you're more of an education facility as opposed to like a conservation facility?
I think our education is our primary focus always, and it allows us to do the educational component for the public, allows us to do the conservation angle, because conservation, basically you have to have a funding source. If you don't have a funding source, you can't do any conservation. And so I would say the education aspect is always first here, and then that feeds into the conservation angle. So
What made you want to go into like starting a reptile park and the education aspect and everything of that?
Well, I actually never wanted to do a reptile park. It's been totally organic. I was an educator. I taught high school for a lot of years, and then we started doing educational programs with the animals. So I was keeping them in the classroom, and as time went on, it just kind of evolved to where because of animal welfare issues, we don't like to use animals for very long. Like we use an alligator in an educational presentation. When it hit like 2 years of age, we would retire it. And people just kind of organically started to say, can we come see the retired animals, because they were larger, of course, and it kind of just started from there. And it's kind of weird. I mean, it was never intended to be what it is at all. So it's a totally unplanned, it's just kind of happened like that. It's really kind of it's like I said, it's a good thing because it's been organic. So we kind of have grown steadily through the years.
So have there been any new projects you've been working on with your park?
We always have a new project. There's always some out there. Right now, I would say well, I don't even know if I want to say our primary project is, we have our what we call T-plows, the albino Nile crocodiles. We have Temistoma. Chinese alligators are not a new project here, but they're kind of a omnipresent project here. There's always a lot of species that are moving around out here, and Cuban crocodiles are a project. We're probably going to reproduce these in the next year or two. Same for saltwater crocodiles, but I would say the newest projects are probably the T positives and the Temistomas. So.
What's your favorite crocodilian?
That depends on what day of the week it is. As a general rule, the Nile crocodile is always my favorite, and I don't come off of them all that often. They're the one that we have the most here, but the Orinoco crocodile is a 1A on that list because they're pretty impressive animals, and I also like the Acutus an awful lot. See, I already told you 3, so obviously I don't have a real straight up favorite. So. And I really like the Temistomas a lot too, but I literally could just keep on going. And I don't want to slight the American alligator or the Chinese alligator either, But as a general rule, if I had to pick one to keep, it would probably be a Nile crocodile or the Orinoco crocodile. So, if I had to.
What made you go specifically into crocodilians and kind of push out like lizards and snakes and other
Well, we
reptiles?
keep those too. I mean, they're here, and we keep a lot of turtles. But I've always, I grew up in Connellsville, Pennsylvania. There's not a crocodilian for a long, many, many miles, and I intentionally wanted to move south to be where there were crocodilians native, and of course that's the American alligator. And so it was either going to be here or Florida, or somewhere along the coast down here. And just so happened we landed here in Texas, and they had a pretty good population of alligators. And I really can't say why. It was just they've always fascinated me since I was young, and and I literally have. I don't want to say dedicated my life to it because that might be too strong, but to move where we did because they were here, and then to have this type of situation, it's kind of, I guess you could say we kind of went all in on them just from a fascination standpoint. So it's worked out. So better half.
So you mentioned one of your current projects is the Chinese alligators.
Yeah.
So what does all that entail in terms of like paperwork and just general
They're
work?
an SSP animal, so what that is, that's a species survival plan. And so basically what happens is that zoos across the country that maintain SSP animals, there's a central genetic bank on these animals, so that if you're part of the SSP, your animal its genetics and bloodlines are tracked, so that you are not crossing closely related animals, or and what it does, it just helps to keep the lines intact, so that if something should happen to a wild population, then you have a kind of a fallback group, because you're not going to produce enough. I say that. I mean, I actually, let me take that back. I think you could produce enough in captivity to make a substantial dent in a reintroduction program, particularly with an animal that is adapted to, like, say, our climate here. Because right now we have, I believe, 21, 23 Chinese alligators on site, most of which are females. Within 5 or 6 years, those animals will come online. And if we decide to start breeding all of those animals, you could be very easily producing 100 animals annually, if not more. And right now, the current wild population is about 150. That's max. It's probably actually a little bit less than that. And now there are about 5,000 animals on farms over there. And but if you start producing 100 plus animals a year, you could make a reasonable dent in a wild population if you want to do reintroductions. The problem with it is it doesn't really work like that. And I don't want to say it's a dirty little secret of some of these things, but reintroductions don't happen often. So most of the animals, particularly in the crocodilian world, you really have to have a place for the animal to go before you actually breed them. Otherwise, you end up overloaded with animals. I mean, because the crocodilian is, I know Nate and I've talked about this before, they're the perfect storm of high reproduction, a lot of babies, and a really large adult size. And there's really just no place, like, if you have an elephant has one baby every 2 years, that's your planning. So, in a decade, you're dealing with five animals. With crocodilian, you could have in that same decade several hundred, if not more than that, of any particular species. Like, say, Orinoco crocodiles, which have 30 to 50 babies a clutch. You're talking 300 to 500 babies potentially for one female. That's a lot of animals you have to house in a winter situation or anything like that.
So, you don't think reintroduction efforts are like a great long-term solution?
No, I think they're an excellent solution. They just don't happen very often because there's a lot of politics to it. There's a lot of permitting and such. It's not like you can just go, like, say, to Venezuela and say, hey, we have 300 Orinoco crocodiles we produced here, we want to let them out. It just doesn't work like that. Or hey, we produce 150 Chinese alligators, we want to take them to China and just let them go. It just doesn't work like that. It sounds good on paper. It's great public relations, but it's a lot harder than just saying, you're going to do it. It would be great, because then you could ramp up production. Like, we have 13 Orinoco crocodiles or whatever it is out here, and we don't breed them at all because they can't survive the winter. So for each one that you have to have winter housing, which is large, expensive housing to do. And right now with 13, it's what it is. But you multiply that up to 50 to 100 animals and start doing it annually, and you have no place to put them. I mean, it quickly would be where no facility can do that and be stable. I mean, for one animal like that, it's just not. It's really just not doable. And so they're always scrambling to find places to put these large crocodilians when they do reproduce them, and it gets to be real problematic. Real problematic to find good spots for them all to go. So.
How do you balance with running a reptile park and stuff? Reptiles in my mind is kind of like NASCAR. Like people watch it for the crash, right? but so like, how do you balance like making it entertaining for people, but at the same time not like making it seem like all reptiles or crocodilians are these super dangerous man-eaters and stuff?
That's actually the easiest part. Honestly, when most people go to any reptile facility, typically they're very boring, a lot of them, and because the animal enclosures are too small. And so when you go to like a lot of the places, the crocodile has a choice of either flopping in the water or sitting up on a little tiny piece of land that it has. But here, our enclosures are so big. I mean, some of them are well over an acre in size, that when the crocodiles come down, it's almost like seeing them in the wild. Like if you were going to go to, say, Venezuela or Africa, and you would see the animals slide down the bank when they knew that the wildebeest was about to cross over there, it's going to be a feeding. That's the same thing that happens when our tour guides go through. The crocodiles come to the feeding stations, the people get to see them swim over, so they're getting to see the natural behavior of that and seeing them swim over, and then they're just seeing the actual feeding of what the animal actually is. And we make a very big point of saying they're not bloodthirsty killers. This is, and so we factor in the amazement of what the animal actually is, and people really get it, man. It resonates with people. We very rarely have to do any of what you would explain like that and that's more of, I think, what you say is almost like a Florida experience, where people want to stick their heads in the alligators' mouths and stuff like that. We found that that's a really antiquated method and really antiquated way of looking at the animal. The general public in 2021 is very, very open to a naturalistic wildlife experience, to where that's what they really want to see, that's what they really appreciate. And a large number of people, I would say the majority, see that kind of old stunt as, well, animal abuse. I think that's what a lot of people view it as now, and so we steer way clear of anything like that. So, and we've never had any issues at all with, in terms of entertainment. Matter of fact, it works the exact opposite way. We get, the animals will jump for their food and they'll come up and do all that. It's spectacular enough. You don't need to do. We're props for them, and they do just fine. So
that's good.
So you mentioned that you use your education more as like a way to funnel in resources to conservation.
Yeah.
What are some conservation efforts you help fund?
Man, we do a lot of stuff. We do bongo surveillance project. From the crocodile end, we bought an entire 25 acres in Belize just to do conservation. They have two crocodile species there, Cutis and Morlays, and that's with the Crocodile Research Coalition. They're running programs down there. We give money to a variety of conservation issues in places like that. And so, but what we've decided to do going forward is, because of the way we did it in Belize, a lot of these places, the biggest thing a lot of conservation places do not have is their own land. And so they're always constantly begging and pleading for dollars to do this, to do that. But like, for instance, for the Orinoco crocodile, if you could go down, I know they need grow out pens to grow out the animals that they're doing in their reintroduction programs that they're breeding down there on site. I think breeding on site is the best thing you can ever do. Like, nothing we do in America will ever be as good as being able to breed Orinoco crocodile in Venezuela, or like breeding the Chinese alligator in China. It's just, they're just great ways to do it. So we're more interested in, I think, going forward, like actually building the facilities like there on site in these places, because you can fund these down there for dime on a dollar compared to the United States. And so we're more interested in like we're in a partnership with the people that are doing this in Venezuela, building the actual facility down there for them with our, under our banner. Same thing that we're doing in Belize, and you just kind of go forward from that. It's just a far better way to spend your conservation dollar than it is just to send a check. So writing a check to an organization is probably the easiest thing you can actually do. And then what they do with that is up to them. You don't have any real control over that. There's some really great places like Crocfest that they use 100% of the money for conservation projects, but other ones have a lot of administration fees and such like that, so you don't ever know how much money is actually being used for what you're doing. But we always give the Crocfest and such like that, but our goal is, I think, changed to where we're actually going to pick up property and do stuff like that to hold the groups for that down there. So just as kind of a different way of doing it, we think it's a little bit more effective.
So you mentioned you had other kind of reptiles like snakes and lizards. What other kind of stuff do you have at your facility?
We got a large herd of tortoises. There's probably, I think we keep 5 or 6 species of tortoises out here. I don't know how many snakes we have. It's probably 15 or 20. There's tegus. There's a lot of stuff like that. We have a lot of aquatic turtles. There's probably 4 or 5 species of soft shells. Various, sliders and cooters and whatnot like that. So there's a lot of turtles and tortoises out here. All the stuff that we use is for, just to fill in the gaps on the educational presentations that we do. So we have a snake and lizard presentation, and of course we let people feed in the tortoise yard and that kind of thing. So, and then we keep some big mammals too. We keep bison and eland and waterbuck and red kangaroos and stuff like that. So that's just filler for the park, though. I mean, that just kind of fills the gaps around. So
I got you. Cool.
So you mentioned your Chinese alligator project.
Mm-hmm.
Is it true that you kind of made a bit of a breakthrough in terms of breeding them here in the U.S.?
Well, they had been bred in the United States for several decades, and part of that, to be honest, is that the animals are kept indoors. A lot of times they're kept in northern climates. So like when you're dealing in a zoological situation, it's very artificial. It doesn't matter what a zoo does for the most part, it's very artificial. And here we're totally natural. So when we put animals together down here, you expect them to reproduce. And it's really, when people, they always want to give us credit for these Chinese alligators and the Nile crocs we reproduce and other things, but I always feel a little bit sheepish about it a little bit, because really all we do is build them an enclosure, give them proper nutrition, and we pretty much let nature do the rest. There's really no magic to what, it's just proper care. If you give an animal proper care, you're going to have reproduction. And we get reproduction all across out here. It's everything from waterbuck to eland to you name it, everything breeds here. So, and it's because they're all kept naturally. And if something is not reproducing, then you probably have a problem with the animal itself. But it's nothing. I wish there was more of a story to it. It's just when we got our female, when the Bronx Zoo, it's a partnership with the Bronx Zoo, and so whenever we got the female sent to it, she was young, and she's like 7 years old, I believe, 7 or 8 years old. So we figured she'd be here and grow for a couple years before we see our first clutch. But she bred the first year, and so we ended up with, I think, 2 hatchlings that year. Her fertility was low, which is normal in crocodilians. First year, you almost always have low fertility, and it's increased every year since. So now we've had 4 straight years of reproduction from her, and she's 11 now. So she's not even in her prime yet, so she'll continue to get better for the next several decades. So, and then eventually she'll start declining egg total and everything like that. But she's just now entering her not really, I don't want to say not even entering it. She's still probably 5 or 6 away from actually entering her peak. So she's a good female.
So obviously you put a big emphasis on like the natural environment and everything. Obviously you're a zoo and a reptile park, so you can do more of that. I've noticed in like the hobby though of just like kind of individuals, people are really moving towards the end and stressing to make the enclosures as natural as possible and getting bioactive enclosures and stuff. What are your thoughts on that in that regard?
I think that's fantastic. I mean, we keep, I have two sons, and so there's animals that we keep as pets, and they're all in bioactive type enclosures, stuff like that. It's just it's really like you just using bearded dragons as an example. I mean, they've gone from people keeping them and swearing you had to keep them on paper towels to keep them on artificial turf to now they're keeping on what dirt. I mean, I can't believe people even argued about keeping them on dirt. They should be on dirt. I mean, it's just, to me, that's just common sense, So, but there are people out there that would swear up and down, you can't keep them on dirt. It just blows my mind about stuff like that. And but yeah, I think that's a very positive trend in the hobby, because if for a long time, I mean, everybody's wanted to shove things in drawers, and drawers have their place. I'm not an anti-drawer guy. I think for certain snakes, they really actually are very positive, as opposed to the snake being out in the open all the time, or even in an enclosure where it has a lot of hiding place. I think there's a lot of snakes that do very well in drawers, but I think if you're having naturalistic vivariums, I think that's a positive thing for the animal as a whole, So they're seen as less disposable now. I mean, you guys are young and everything, but back in the early days, man, when all this herpetoculture was starting up, I mean, they would stack these things up in aquariums. You go to a reptile show and they'd be 50 lizards there stacked on top of each other, and 20 of them be virtually on death's doorstep, and they just throw them away in the trash. So the whole industry has improved, radically compared to what it was, several decades ago. So. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So you mentioned you used to be into monitor lizards?
Yeah, I used to breed a lot of monitor lizards. We were actually some of the first people that were actually breeding them. There was a guy out in Arizona named Frank Reedus, and he was really breeding a lot of monitor lizards. And then there's a guy here in Houston named Rob Faust. He was breeding a lot of monitors, and then there was us. And so we were, I know that we have the first written account of breeding Asian water monitors. We were the first people to do that and publish it. And now they're commonly bred. Back when we did it, back in, man, that was probably early 90s maybe. And there was no one breeding Asian water monitors. The imports were so cheap that, and they still are inexpensive, but there was no market for captive bred water monitors at all, really. And we were doing it. We were breeding Argus, blackthroats. I think that was the primary three that we were doing. Frank was breeding Kimberley rock monitors. He was breeding the Ackies, a lot of Australian stuff out there, Flavirufus, and all of those. And then now the entire thing has changed. Monitors are very commonly kept and bred. And what was interesting is that when we were doing very much trial by error to figure out how to successfully do this, and one of the things we just learned is just have deep dirt, deep warm dirt. You're gold. I mean, that was really, because back then everybody was using just too shallow for a big lizard. They sometimes took 2 or 3 feet of dirt. When you're keeping an animal in your home or wherever you're keeping, I mean, 2 or 3 foot of dirt is a lot of dirt. And then you have to keep it just the right temperature for them to target it. But once you got that right, yeah, they were very, very easy. They would breed constantly. So honestly, when we were breeding Argus monitors, we were breeding them like chickens. We had a male in between females, and we had the enclosure subdivided, and we lift the door and let him come over here and mate with this one over here. As soon as we thought she was gravid, we'd separate him off, put him back on the female over here. He'd make sure she was gravid. This one would lay over here, give her about a month or so to bounce back food-wise, because they bounce back pretty quick. Shift them back over. It was darn near just like a conveyor belt. I mean, it was just insane. It was crazy. It was just nuts. And they were popular. Argus monitors were pretty popular. You don't see as many of them anymore, but they were really great animals to keep. They stood up on their back legs, tripoded a lot and everything. They were really, really neat animals. So, but we learned a lot about breeding reptiles through monitors, because like I said, back in the day, there was no, like now, if you want to breed any species, you can pretty much go online, find somebody that's done it. There's almost a cookbook to how to do it. But back then, I mean, man, there was nothing like that. I mean, so we were all kind of just filling our way through it, and that made it fun. You learn a lot from it, and by doing that through that process, crocodilians are a breeze. I mean, there's what we learned there to carry over into these other animals has made crocodilian breeding very, very easy. So crocodilians breed very easy as a general concept, but but learning about nesting and just how the animals react to certain environmental stimuli, it was very big, good learning curve on it all, So
Have you ever observed any unusual behavior when it comes to like females crocodilians laying eggs?
we've observed a lot of behaviors. I don't know that I would call them unusual. I think it's all usual for the species. Like the Niles, they're always going to be a hole nester. Now, I will say that the Niles prefer to nest in sand, but since we don't have a lot of sandy soil here, they will nest in a lot of unique ways. They stay a little bit more shallow than they would otherwise. But like the alligators, they make a mound, that kind of thing. So and the mounds are neat and they're easy to find, and they're pretty straightforward. So crocodiles are very straightforward in a lot of ways. I mean, they're very, very straightforward in a lot of ways. So if you can keep them with enough water, get their temperatures right, and manage to stay safe around them, I mean, they're very straightforward in their care for the most part. So
You said they're digging their nest shallower. Does that affect the sex that's coming out, or?
Yeah, it does. And now everything we incubate here is we incubate for a female. So our entire group out here is like 99% female. Because you just don't need that many males. I mean, you don't, and it allows us to track our bloodlines and know which males with the female. And like our Nile crocodile group, we have I think 162 Nile crocs. I think there's 6 males, maybe 7. And but when you have we've only ever had them hatch naturally one time because it's something we really try to avoid. There's no real positive to it at all. Because if you miss the nest and the animals hatch, you run the risk of a bird picking one up and depositing it somewhere where you don't want it to be, that kind of thing. And also it will change the sex because when they're sitting up high like that, you're gonna end up with uncontrolled sex ratio as opposed to what we want to make sure we have the females and so we did miss an nest one year, and we ended up finding the hatchlings, and that was good. But it's something that we really try to avoid.
So you said you only have like 6 or so Nile crocs, male Nile crocs, but the majority of those are the T plus albinos.
Yeah,
correct?
the actual ones that are not T plus, we got 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah.
So T plus albino is your next big project?
Yeah, we probably will not actually breed any more normal Niles. I don't want to say ever again, but it's going to be a long, long time. I can't see any particular reason to breed any normal Niles right now. So, like everyone that will breed will be the T positives. Just like I told you today, we're going to turn the whole park yellow. So, yeah. It'll look really radical when they're really big and they're all coming out. And that is part of it, because I'm not a really big morph guy, but I really do like those. And they're just a visual thing that happens when you see those. And like when the public's out here and they look at our normal Nile crocodiles, they love them. I mean, the Madagascar group is very pretty. They're golden. The South African group tends to have more of a yellow-white to them. But when they see those T-positive albinos, it's the equivalent, if not more, than how the general public sees white alligators. And they will literally stop and go, oh, look, that's an albino. They'll say this to them, and they're stunned by them. And so when you have a group of animals like that, and the people get to see them like when they're adults, it's so visually stunning. It's just something that they will never forget. And it really does help the cause of the animal worldwide, because more people see that, they think them as a beautiful animal rather than something that is, an animal to be shot or vermin or whatever you want to call it. So there's a real place for an animal like that from just a visual beauty standpoint. So,
a question I like to ask people, and I find it funny because the response I get back kind of varies based on like age and stuff. But since you're a crocodilian guy, what are your thoughts on like Steve Irwin and his kind of?
Oh, I thought he did a lot of good. I do think he did a lot of good. I think he was kind of over the top on some things, but I will say this: he did things that I think were right, that a lot of people take for granted over here that I think are wrong. And one of them that I think that he did that was really right is he was adamant that he did not want that animal to get tired. And when you're around crocodiles long enough or alligators long enough, you do not want that animal to get tired. That lactic acid buildup in their blood will literally kill that animal. And there's certain people out in, you'll see them in Florida and such like that, they literally try to tire the animal out. That's like their goal. I want to get it tired so that I can handle the animal easier. And you will handle it easier, but there's also a chance that the animal is going to die. And so Steve, to his credit, was very, very good about making sure he did not want that animal to get tired. They would get on the back as fast as they could, restrain it, and it was just I thought that was a very positive thing that he was doing, you know. So even though it looked kind of flashy sometimes, and it was, he was doing the right thing in that regard. Where a lot of people they'll dance around with the animal, try to make it tired, and that also looks flashy, but it's also the wrong kind of flash. So he was doing, if you know crocodilians, you know that he was doing the right thing there, you know, making that animal be subdued so it's not going to be, you know, tired and filled with lactic acid. It's just a safer thing for the animal. He was putting the animal first, you know, so when he went and dove on the animal, it looks kind of like a crazy man, but I mean, you know, and he probably was, but his heart was in the right place. So he wasn't doing it for him. You know, so he could have danced around it, made him tired, and do all that stuff too, and he did not do that. You know, so. But he did a lot for crocodiles, though. He really did. I mean, I don't think there's probably been anybody in the last 3 decades that's raised an animal's status like that guy did. I mean, you know, really, really impressive what he did there. So.
Yeah. I think his biggest impact is impacting people of like me and Nate's age of getting us actually into the reptile hobby and interested in that kind of stuff.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. There's no doubt.
Yeah. I feel like the majority of people our age and a little younger who are into reptiles are mostly got into it because of him.
Oh, that's a lot for sure. And the reptile industry's changed and gotten so much bigger. I mean, like, when I was when I was like 20 or whatever, just young, there were no reptile shows. I mean, you know, if there was, it'd be like 4 guys coming together because they kept corn snakes or something or whatever. Now the whole industry is just, it's been really interesting to see the evolution of the reptile show as time has gone on. I mean, it's become, I actually like them less now. To me, their heyday was probably maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Because I remember we would go to reptile shows and you could actually get, I don't want to say good deals, but they were pretty good deals, you know. Now you go, they're very similar to just going to a reptile store. You know, the pricing and everything like that. I mean, you can deal breeder direct and that was great. But I remember we'd go to a show and there was this guy at the end of the show. He'd just take all his snakes and put them into the bucket. He'd just put $5 on it, you know. I mean, there was just a crazy number of morphs and stuff in there, and you could just, you know, if you want them, you just go and get them, and it was really great. And the variety of animals was a lot more, you know. And now you get a lot of these reptile shows, and they're very heavy on one category or the other. And
ball pythons, bearded dragons.
Yeah, you know. So in that regard, it's a little less. I think than what it used to be, you know. But there are some. I mean, like there's a really good one here in Texas called Herbst. He tries to get a lot of variety here, and you know, I know the NARBCs. You'll see some pretty good variety there, but it just depends. They seem like they're kind of flexing back a little bit towards variety now. I know they're doing some venomous shows and stuff now, but and that's, I think, you know, if you like to go see a variety of stuff, that's good. Well, you know, 15 years ago that was like the standard, and also a lot of it's got to do with regulations because they're really tightened up on a lot of states now on what you can keep here or what you can keep there. So there's a lot of that too. So it's not just one thing. There's kind of a lot of factors there. So
that's one thing that I think is interesting is like when you were like in the field and stuff, and there wasn't a lot of people there. Like, I feel like the majority, for the most part of people, like, they had to, like, really like reptiles in order to stay and dedicate their lives or devote most of their lives to working with them, as opposed to, like, now I feel like you get a lot of, it's not as bad as this, but it's starting to turn like how people are with dogs, where they just get a dog and they have no idea anything about the dog, and that they have to raise it a certain way.
Yeah, it's been like that for a little while. You know what? Somewhere along the line, I don't exactly know where it happened, 'cause like I said, we were breeding monitor lizards back there in the day, man. There was no market for monitor lizards captive bred. I mean, cause the imports were coming in. You could buy a water monitor import for $50, you know. So nobody's gonna pay $750 for your captive bred water monitor. I think I ended up selling them for like $200 or something. And now, I mean, they go $1,500. Literally, I go on Fauna Classifieds. I look at these water monitors on there. I'm going, God dang it, $1,500! I can't even believe it. You know, I mean, it just blows my mind. And you know, and we were doing this, and we had no competition. We were the only people doing it. You know. And it just, there was no market for them out there because people just didn't view captive bred back then quite the same as they were just happy to have the monitor like that. So somewhere along the line, it became more of an industry, you know, as opposed to guys who were just really passionate about what they had, what they were keeping. Because I mean, I know guys who they were really passionate about. When you could pick your animal, there was some guy out there who was crazy about them. He just had 100 of them, you know. And whether it be rattlesnakes or whatever, and somewhere along the line though, people just, and I don't think it's all bad, but they decided like there's money to be made here, and the morph thing really revved up. Like I remember a guy told me, and this was, I mean, I was a kid, I was probably, I don't know, 15, 16, and a guy said, hey, and he knew I was into reptiles. He called me into his house. He said, man, you got to see this snake. And it was an albino corn snake. And at the time, this is like a brand new thing. I mean, this is like, I don't know, this is probably in the 80s, mid 80s, whatever. And I was like, God dang, that's a nice snake, you know. And right now, an albino corn snake, most people won't even take the time to stop and look at it, you know. I mean, but it was back then, that was a stunning thing, you know. I mean, this guy had his corn snake group, and he had added the albino to it, and that was truly a remarkable animal, you know. I mean, and I remember the first time I saw it, that was really something. And but now, I mean, they've come so far with it, and it's kind of neat. But you know, it's an interesting thing. Like for instance, Tom Crutchfield, once a month you get this price list from Tom Crutchfield. God dang, you want to see some stuff, man? There was stuff. If you ever get a chance to go look at one of those things, I wish I would have kept some of them now. He had animals on like his crocodilian list. There's probably 15 species on there. You know, on occasion there was Tomistoma on there and Kruger crocs and stuff like that. I mean, it just, you know, and now if you look at it classified for a crocodile, it's going to be a Morlea, dwarf caiman, or, you know, American alligator or something like that. But, I mean, you can't even buy specs anymore. You know, I mean, used to be specs were literally in every fish store, not even reptile store. Specs were $25 to $40 in every fish store across America. You know, I mean, you could just get a spectacle caiman anywhere. And, I mean, I saw thousands of these things when I was young just because they were in every fish store across America. And now you can't even have a spectacle caiman, which is just crazy. You know, it's insane. But that's one of the big differences today, stuff like that. And at the same time, there's probably more stuff actually available if you have permits and things like that. Because, I mean, you know, the animals we have out here, as an example, I mean, they're just, it's an insane group of animals. I mean, it's truly an insane group of animals. I mean, the stuff that's here, I mean, everything from Chinese alligators, the Philippines, to Mistum. Basically, the only thing we don't have is Goro. You know, I mean, they're probably coming within the next year or two. And so it's insane that the access is there if you cross your T's and dot your I's, you know, and that kind of stuff like that. It's out there, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, if you don't mind getting into it, what is that? I think a lot of people don't realize how much like permitting and paperwork and all that kind of stuff, the politics that goes into like running a reptile park and stuff. What has that been like? Yeah, and I tell people all the time, and I know I've told Nate a bunch, that the thing you really need to do always is you need to be above board. I tell people this constantly, because there's a lot of, you know, if you're in reptiles long enough or animals or anything, there's a lot of backdoor stuff that can occur. And if you really want to have good relations where a lot of access to animals are, you just need to be above board. I mean, you know, basically be a person of integrity and run your operation like that, because, you know, no one wants to deal with somebody who is potentially going to get an animal and then sell it for $20,000, you know, 2 weeks later, you know, when they entrusted you with the animal. And so, you know, when you get a facility, and I also tell people, build your facility first
and the animals will come. Because what happens is, just like I was talking about earlier, is crocodilians, like I said, are the perfect storm of size and offspring. And so one zoo breeding, if you have one zoo breeding, and let's just use, I don't know, we'll just use Orinoco's because that's one as an example. You get 15 to 20 baby Orinoco crocodiles, let's say in 2020. By 2025, you're talking about 20 animals that are probably 6 to 9 feet. And at 6 to 9 feet, they're several hundred pounds. Well, you could go to any zoo in the country and you look around at their holding area, they're not holding that many crocodiles at that size. So they have to find places for them to go. And that is where, and some of these animals end up in very poor conditions until good homes are found for them. And that is where the rub with crocodilians always is. And if you have a good facility and you have a good track record, it's a good place to potentially help out a lot of these animals and do it above board and actually make a really positive difference in the programs. But if you conduct your business in such a way that you're not a trustworthy facility or you don't have good care or anything like that, you're not going to be a viable outlet for some of these animals because the animals are really valuable. They're part of a program, and nobody expects perfection or anything like that. I mean, we're absolutely not perfect or anything like that, but if we make a mistake, we own it and we try to do better, the next time. And that's just kind of, we've been pretty, we've had these animals out here for decades now, so. But that's kind of the in and out of how that goes, They'll find you. If you have a good facility, they'll find you, because there's a lot of animals, man. There's a bunch.
Kind of the reptile park of dreams, the Kevin Costner.
Yeah, exactly right. You build it, they will find you. Yeah, they'll come for sure. Yeah, because that's basically how it started out here. We built it in. We were just going to keep Nile crocodiles and American alligators because we wanted to show people what a crocodile was. We wanted to show people the native alligator, build the conservation, and even to this day, we could run our park with just those two species and be just fine. I don't think it would hurt our gate one bit. And but the Houston Zoo is very close to us. They're about 25, 30 minutes down the road. And the curator there is a good friend of mine, and we've just developed a partnership through the years. And so just through networking, from him and the experiences we've had with them and him talking to other zoos, then they talk to each other and one talks to another, blah, 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 blah. Over the last 15, 20 years, we know everybody now. We deal with everybody. And so, it's just really easy to move animals around and stuff like that. So it's been very convenient in a lot of ways. Yeah.
So you mentioned you could probably run your facility just on Nile crocs and American alligators.
Yeah.
So what are the things that really draw you to Nile crocs in particular?
Oh, there's no, American alligator is very storied, but Nile crocodiles are a very storied animal. They're bonded to the African culture, which in a way few other animals are. They've been worshipped as a deity for thousands of years, And then on top of that, the animal is actually, they're the perfect animal to show the public because they're a big, powerful predator. They're on TV all the time. All the time. So most people at least have some understanding of what a Nile crocodile is. They're a beautiful animal. They can really have a lot of color to them. And maybe my favorite part about them at all is they're very intelligent and extremely trainable. They're not nearly there are far, far worse crocodiles in terms of attitude than Nile crocodiles. We've got to the point where I'll mow the grass with Nile crocs, and I'm not going to say on occasion it's not challenging, but 95% of the time I can just move them away. We've had times where I've weed whacked around a Nile crocodile and she didn't even move. I literally weed whacked around her body as if you're like outlining her or something like that. They get really used to you, and part of it is because we've raised all of ours here. We don't bring in any adults from any place else ever. And I shouldn't say ever. There are some Orinoco's in this group, but even them, most of those have been raised here. But for Nile crocodiles, they've all been born here. They've all been raised here. They've been with people since day one. And they get very used to a routine. And that's actually one of our secrets here, because people always say they'll walk by some of our enclosure and they go, wow, this is really close. Well, part of the reason we're able to do it is these animals have been with people since day one, and they know the routine, they know the barriers and stuff like that, and it works really, really well. So, but yeah, that's why we like the Nile crocodile. Plus, they're more cold tolerant than any other crocodile in the world. So even they have a lot of resiliency now. Now we have lost crocodiles in winters through the decades. Not many, but given the proportion of crocodiles we keep, it's really small. But they are much more cold tolerant than the other crocodiles. So they're pretty resilient.
Do you bring in your crocodiles in the winter, or
all the crocodiles come in except for the Nile crocs, the Chinese alligators, and the American alligators. And if it gets really bad, we do bring the Nile crocodiles in. Like last winter was the coldest winter in Texas in like 100 years, and we brought in every single Nile crocodile that was out there. So we had them everywhere. They were literally everywhere.
Stuff with the gills.
they were everywhere.
Is that what draw you to monitor lizards too? Is the intelligence aspect?
Yeah, to some degree. The monitor lizard is not a comparable animal intelligence-wise to a crocodile. They're an intelligent animal in terms of like other lizards and snakes and that kind of stuff. But the basic biology of a crocodile compared to say a monitor lizard is very different. The crocodile is the only reptile that has the well-developed cerebral cortex. They're closely related to birds, which blows a lot of people's minds. So the bird and the crocodile are much more similar than, say, the crocodile and, say, the Komodo dragon or any other monitor lizard. And so why I find monitor lizards interesting, for a lot of different reasons, their intelligence is not one of them, at least not because when you spend any amount of time with a crocodile or an alligator, any other reptile just is very, very stupid. There's really no other way to say it. The trainability, crocodiles and alligators will learn a routine. Man, sometimes it's 2 or 3 days. They learn and focus so well that it's really, honestly, sometimes it can be problematic because if you're doing something wrong, usually within 2 days, that crocodile's picked up on your behavior. And this is how they hunt. I mean, they follow people even in Africa and such. Like, I had to go to the water and bathe there. And if you do it 2 days in a row in some of these places, that crocodile's there on day 3. And you won't have a day 4 then. I mean, that's how that works. And so they're very, very different than any other reptile. And once you spend time with them, it's so blatantly obvious. That's why I'll see online discussions sometimes when people sit there and say, well, I got this and I got this, and I'm going like, God, you people just don't even know. I mean, it's just because that's just people that have no real experience with them. They're vastly different than any other reptile out there, and that's actually one of the reasons once you start working with them, so few people revert back to other reptiles that have been really deep into crocodiles, because once you get really deep into them, there's an understanding there and an interaction that you're capable of with them that you're not able to have with other reptiles. And even though you can keep other reptiles, like I said, we have other reptiles out here right now, they really pale in the type of relationship that you can form with them. I would go as far as to say that the only real true give and take you can have with a reptile relationship is with the crocodilian, because they're the only ones that are actually truly understanding what is happening there. And not only that, they have the largest social component of any reptile in the world. I mean, they take care of their young. The vocalization level that they do is beyond anything any other reptile does, because they're closely related to birds. And so because you're so closely related to a bird, I mean, everybody knows that birds flock and birds talk and birds take care of their young. Reptiles don't do that stuff. They just don't do that stuff on the same level. And so then you get, like, everybody thinks, although if a lizard looks at its baby, hey, take care of its baby, it's awesome. Crocodiles do this as a matter of course. I mean, that mother will stay with those babies for up to 2 years, and they talk back and forth. The bellowing of the alligators in the swamps to communicate back. There's 20-some different sounds alligators make to communicate. It's a totally different experience with them. And so, not everybody gets it. If you keep, like, a dwarf caiman, you keep one, you'll learn some of this. But if you keep them in a naturalistic system, you can keep them in a group, you'll see stuff that will just blow your mind. I mean, it's just, the communication level is it's just unbelievable, so.
Do you find there's a hierarchy in their social structures?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, very much so. And it resets anytime you add an animal to the group. We were talking about this today actually. One of the more difficult things to do is introduce animals to groups. And we have one now crocodile here that a guy raised in his basement in Massachusetts. And he sent it down here to us, which, we were glad to take it. But it has been a problem animal every group we put it in, because the social component of that animal just did not develop because it was by itself for 7 years. And that in of itself would be a worthy study as to why this occurs, whether its language is just not understood by the other crocodiles, or it's just so antisocial that but like we put it in different groups, and sometimes it's the outcast, sometimes she tries to be the strong animal, and it's very interesting to see. But it happens with the animals like that are not raised together. If they're raised together, you don't have any of these problems. None. They're fantastic together. We have animals out here that have always been raised together. We can move them group to group, and they're just fine. And they understand each other. The communication is fine. But a singly raised animal is a real problem. It takes a while for them to adjust to learn the languages. So.
Something I've heard a lot, and talking to people like you, I think there's more to it, so I'm curious what your thoughts on. When I've heard about like hierarchy of like the social structure of like crocodiles and stuff, they usually just say it's like there's really just two. There's like the more dominant ones and the more subordinate ones. Is it more complex than that, or?
It's more complex than that, but if you get down to brass tacks, I mean, that's pretty much how it is. I mean, you got a dominant animal in there. It's typically the dominant bull. But it also depends on how they're kept. If your enclosures are large and there's a lot of nooks and crannies, a lot of water, you can have more than one dominant animal, but they'll stay in their own territory. And like that, and kind of subdivide it up, and that's how it would be. And it's also species level too. Like Nile crocs tend to be very gregarious, so unless you have like a really antisocial one, they do fairly well in groups. Saltwater crocodiles are not very good in groups. I mean, even with minimal animals together, you can sometimes with some real problems. American alligators are kind of a mixed bag. A lot of times you end up keeping a lot of them together, but they also tend to really like to space themselves out, so if they have a choice to do so as well. So Philippine crocs are an absolute worst crocodile on the planet. They're just the worst. I mean, in between aggression and they do not like to be around each other a lot at all. So Orinoco's, they do pretty well together. Although on occasion we had an Orinoco crocodile killed by Coast Pacific last year. And every group we put that crocodile in, she was attacked. So we put them in this other group, and these animals get along perfectly. They've been along together. We never have any issues with them. She was attacked there. We put her in another group where animals were getting along very peacefully. She was attacked there. Our hypothesis on this, we think she might have been what is called a hot female. And what happens when you do that is you have your females that are at a certain temperature and your males at a certain temperature, but then when you go high again, you get another female. But that female is called a hot female, and we have our running hypothesis on this is that they are seen as a challenger to the males, because it's the males that are always attacking her. The females leave her alone. And so we're not sure why this is, but both of our males are very peaceful, never do anything to anybody. Both of them attacked her. One almost killed her, and we let her recover for almost 2 full years. Put her in the other group. That male attacked and killed her. So our running hypothesis is that was what's called a hot female, and there's something going on with that there, and that's a social thing there that it's really weird.
Yeah, I wonder how. I'm guessing they must just be able to. Maybe there's like a hormonal imbalance or something that they're able to sense.
We're not sure. They can definitely tell though, because she I don't want to say immediately, but it was within a month she was picked. I mean, immediately the males found her and attacked her. Really, really, really crazy. It's one of the weirdest things we've actually seen. So.
Do you know if there's any studies being done on that?
Not on that. No, that's why we call it a hypothesis, but it would definitely be one that would be worthy of. To do it, you have to have enough animals, and you have to have known hot animals to do it, and there's just not a lot of that being done on farms or zoological facilities because nobody wants the hot end of it, So they're not considered to be as good a breeder or or stable as animals. So, but it's an interesting observation though. So.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Matt, you got any other questions?
No, I don't think so.
All right, well, thank you, Chris, for coming on the show.
Yeah, it was a good conversation, guys. Enjoyed it. So.
See you guys next week.
Really enjoyed it.
Yep, you bet. Take care, man.
Yeah, see ya.